recording real quick. So today's session is recorded. We are going to be sharing it out, and super excited to have two really great individuals here. We have Ryan and Aiden who are joining us. Thank you for taking the time. Look, I'm gonna let them just introduce themselves, who they are, what they're up to, and we'll jump into it from there. But Aiden, why don't you kick us off? Would love to just if you could just share with everyone who you are, what bank you're going to be going to next summer, where you went to school, all that kind of good stuff, and then really would love to hear just why banking for you. And don't worry, it's not an interview, so we won't judge you. We'll stop right there.
No worries. Well, thank you so much, Saul, for having me. Obviously, like super excited to talk and whatnot. And I'll give a quick introduction. So my name's Ada Mohammed. I'm a sophomore at UT Austin. I'm studying finance in the McComb School of Business, Hookham. And I will be going to Goldman Sachs next summer in the New York office doing investment banking and the Natural Resources Group. So I'm super excited about that. And I think sort of my interest in banking and finance really started, I guess, when I was a lot younger. I would watch like random movies where finance would be mentioned and banking would be mentioned, and I had no idea what it actually meant or what it was. And so when I came to college when I was a freshman, I was like, yeah, sign me up, let me do investment banking. And I really didn't even know what that meant. But I sort of joined some clubs at school. I had some good resources and good mentors around me, and I learned a little bit about like what a sell side process really is, what banking really looks like. And I just finished recruiting for banking a few months ago, and I'm super excited. And yeah, that's sort of a background about me.
You set yourself up for it. Favorite banking movie?
Favorite banking movie? Well, I have to go Wall Street. I think Gordon Gekko is one of my favorite all-time characters in sort of the Wall Street scene. I know it's kind of corny and cheesy to say. Definitely do not say that in interviews when you get asked. It's a common pitfall, but I love Gordon Gekko in Wall Street. It's a great movie.
Awesome. And Aiden, real quick, do you just want to clarify a little bit on just what is natural resources? So for those who might just be getting introduced to banking, like what falls under that part?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think like, natural resources, you know, in a lot of way, there are a lot of, subsets and coverage groups in banking. Oil and gas, industrials, and natural resources sort of fall under the same three. Natural resources include a lot of, natural minerals, naturally dug thing up, natural things, I guess, dug up from the ground is like the easiest way to explain it, quite frankly. And a lot of different countries export different materials like cobalt, silver, etc. And there are a lot of companies that basically transport these materials and sell them either D2C or to local governments or other companies. And so essentially in the natural resources group, they run sell sides on some of these companies that run natural resources deals.
Awesome, awesome. Ryan, over to you. Why don't you just share a little bit about who you are, what
Yeah,
you're
of
up to,
course.
and then we'll go for it from there.
Yeah, just first, super excited to be here. Really, thank you for the flattering intro, Sahil. Um, would love to see more cameras on. It's in everybody's best interest that we can see you. Aiden and I are going to be running some IPN investment banking stuff. So the more familiar your face looks, the better, right? So if anybody can turn on their cameras, that would be great. Would love to see some faces. But in terms of introductions, I'm Ryan. I'm a sophomore at Brown. I study electrical engineering. I didn't really know what finance or investment banking was until I actually got to college. Um, I think I kind of stumbled on two ways. So in high school, I was really actually interested in science research. Did a lot of just presentations some more faces. That's awesome. But did a lot of presentations, did a lot of research presentations, went to a lot of research conference, really liked research. But then, as I just did more things, I kind of realized that I don't think that's kind of the environment that I wanted to spend all my time in post college. So actually, I did this funny thing. I did a lot of personality tests and really reflected on what I'm good at. And I realized, maybe my personality was super aligned for finance. But I still didn't want to let go of like this technology aspect that I'd been working on all my life through research. Um, after through the research, I realized like you can actually just pursue your interests within banking. And I'll be working at Evercore in their Menlo Park office doing specifically tech banking. So yeah, that's the quick intro on me. I'm super excited to be here.
Awesome, awesome. Um, cool, cool. So why don't we jump into it? We'll kick off. We got a few questions for the group, but then really a lot of this time we want to spend for you guys asking. Um, for anyone who's still on the fence, right? Because I think especially with banking recruiting, you're thinking about it freshman year on do you want to commit to do this? Would love to just get some context on what your honest advice is. Like Ryan, would love if you just want to share your perspective coming from an engineering background, and then Aiden would love just how you sort of kind of thought about it and your experience through McCombs. But Ryan, why don't you kick us off first?
Yeah, I definitely think the biggest part with investment banking is that you got to really understand that it's a pretty intense career. Like you're going to be working really, really long hours. So if you're on the fence about it, that is something that you really, really need to be comfortable with, is working many, many hours a week. I'd say coming from an engineering background, everybody was telling me like, oh, why are you studying engineering? Why are you going into investment banking all the time? But I really think that like you got to just find the work really interesting. So I'd urge you guys, it's like really nice nowadays. And this is something that I did, is you have access to like ChatGPT, all these like AI models at your fingertips. I would really just urge you guys to just have a conversation with the chatbot, ask them about the investment banking job, and you're actually going to learn so much. And then you can even tell the chatbot about your interests, and then it'll be able to tell you like, oh, your personality would work great for this. I really think like investment banking sometimes a lot of really great investment bankers have like similar personalities, and some personalities really, really thrive in investment banking. And you kind of just have to know if you're personally up for that.
Awesome. Aiden, what about you? What's going through your head when you hear that question?
Yeah, I mean, look, like I think as Ryan sort of said, investment banking is extremely difficult and challenging. I think that's ultimately reflected in the interview process. I think there are, hundreds and hundreds of thousands, if not millions of kids who want to do banking, and every bank only has a specific amount of spots. And so I think coming from McCombs, I was fortunate enough to have upperclassmen students sort of mentor and guide me and, realize like, hey, you know, they're and outline the entire process and say, hey, the financial technicals and the behaviorals are ultimately what makes up these sort of banking interviews. And so, like in my opinion, I think there's three components to doing investment banking. One, which is the biggest component, is networking. So I think obviously there's a 3 to 4 month period where you're talking to analysts, talking to associates on the desk at whatever bank or firm that you're trying to go to, because at the end of the day, that's how you get interviews and that's how you get your foot in the door. You will not get a job or, not get an interview by not networking anywhere. I don't care if you have like the best resume ever, probably like Ryan here, but you will not get an interview without networking. You just won't. Ultimately, once you do get the interview, it is pretty difficult to convert it just because, Evercore, Morgan Stanley, they have 50 spots, 60 spots in the New York office. And, you have like 300,000 kids applying, right? So it's like a really competitive, spot at the end of the day. So I think once you do get the interview, you want to make sure that you're shining in these interviews behaviorally and technically. I think I'm sort of big on this. And if you get the finance technical questions wrong, you will not get a job. That's just like a simple way to put it. There are so many resources online, like guides, AI, etc., where you can learn a lot of these concepts and stuff. And I can tell you right now, there are kids that are grinding these all day long that will not get anything wrong. And so I think to sort of get those jobs, you want to make sure that you're, sort of keen in on the technicals. And I think McCombs does a really good job, at least for me, as sort of emphasizing that. I also do think like depending on the school, like every process is different, right? So like for McCombs, it's like a lot of the stuff matters on what clubs and what orgs you're in on campus. And so, it is a little bit different at, my school, but I think at regardless of what other school, I highly recommend talking to upperclassmen and getting guidance from them. That's like the best way to do it.
I love it. Aiden, I guess follow-up question to that is before you started banking, so what, that's maybe like almost a year ago now, versus now when you're looking back at it, what did you think the recruiting process was gonna be like, or even if you want to take it when you're like freshman fall versus what it ended up being, like what was sort of the big fragmented differences?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So literally probably a year ago, I did not know anything. I knew nothing. You guys like probably take someone random on the street. They knew probably more about banking and how the process worked more than me. I just did not know what it was. I thought originally, in a senior in high school, I thought you just apply, you get an interview, and you talk about stocks, and then I get a job. I had no idea how the process worked. And even until, the first semester as a freshman at UT, I didn't really know anything either. And I sort of learned, again, through like clubs, upperclassmen, etc. Ultimately, I think, I really underestimated the thoroughness of the process in banking. It's extremely thorough. And the timeline for it is extremely long, right? So you will be networking for months, but it'll come down to one 30-minute first round interview that can make or break your future at that bank, which is pretty stressful. And there's a lot of high pressure, right? High intense moments, but that's ultimately what banking is when you get on the job, when you get on the desk. It's high pressure, high tense moments, etc. So I do think that I sort of really underestimated, the lengthiness of the process and how difficult it was. And I think, I sort of sacrificed my entire sophomore first semester, just really grinding, networking, learning, etc. And I think that's what it came down to. And I didn't know that I needed to do that. I thought banking was a lot easier than it was.
No, I completely agree, right? And I think seeing a lot of students go through it, there are these moments where there are these moments where it will be harder than other parts of your college career. But the best part is, as a second semester sophomore, you are now coasting for the next year until your internship. And then, yes, you got to worry about the return offer, but then after that as well, right? So I think as you guys are listening through it, yes, it does seem like it's a lot more pressure up front, well, which because it's true. But I think that there is that trade-off. But Ryan, why don't we jump over to you, and then Aiden would love for you to fill the gaps on maybe what Ryan doesn't hit or your different experiences. But would love for you just to talk about the timeline a little bit. Just what were you doing freshman spring right now? So say like April of last year, what did the summer look like? What did the fall look like? And what did the spring look like for you? And then Aiden, feel free just to share maybe what was similar, what was different from your experience.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for the question. Again, like I said, freshman year, didn't really know that much about finance. So in my spring, I was kind of just doing exactly what you guys are doing now, like going on, seeing panels, talking to people at my school, kind of figuring out what I wanted to do. Eventually, I kind of figured out that, finance is definitely something that I wanted to pursue. So then I tried to find like a finance internship for my freshman year. Actually, really funny story. I ended up using like ChatGPT, like deep research models, and to scrape the internet. And then I found like search funds that I could work at. I emailed them, got interview, and then I got like an internship within like maybe a week. A finance internship maybe a week. I got really lucky. I had to use like some weird method, but ended up working out. So spring, a lot of exploratory stuff and kind of deciding whether or not I wanted to commit to finance. And then in the summer, I did my internship. I kind of balanced that with some technicals. I honestly didn't do that much. I do like maybe a couple hours a week. And then because like my work was finance for that summer, I feel like I started picking up on the technicals pretty quickly. I did a couple mock interviews with some seniors and juniors at my school who are going into investment banking, and they kind of are telling me like, hey, like this is not the best way to say it. Oh, here's how to study it, or let me explain the concept for you. And by the end of the summer, I felt like decently comfortable with my technicals. Still definitely not at the interview ready, but I felt like I could understand things and I could have a conversation in finance. Like when I'd go to my clubs, like freshman year, my finance clubs at school, I'd be so overwhelmed. I had no idea what was going on. But by the end of the summer, it felt like if I were to go to those meetings again, I'd kind of be able to follow up and learn something really learn something really thoroughly when I'd go there. So definitely not interview ready, but had a very pretty solid surface level knowledge of everything. And then, as soon as school started, you kind of have to hit the ground running with networking. Discuss networking with some juniors and seniors at my school. So I kind of understood the process, just shooting out, emails, schedule sending them for throughout the weeks up until honestly like late November to December. At the same time, I was still doing some mock interviewing and trying to work on the technicals while I was balancing it with the schoolwork. And then, you know, by Monday, I mean by January, I'm starting interviews and I felt really, really good and prepared. And the nice thing is that your interviews kind of start after winter break. So you got like a good lock in over winter break, make sure sharpen up everything. I'd say like honestly, the intensity can be terrible, but it could also be really manageable. And I think the thing that determines it is who you kind of have in your corner, right? I feel like if you have a bunch of people mentoring you, telling you what to do at every point, it's not too bad, right? Like you can when you get a weird email and you're not really sure how to respond, you can text a mentor and they can kind of push you in the right direction. Or if you don't really understand something, you can again talk to your mentor and they'll explain it. it really helps keep the momentum going and also just make sure you're on the right track at all times. So I think, investment banking recruiting, definitely intense, but very manageable if you have the right people in your corner helping you out. And that's definitely what we're trying to aim to do here. So yeah.
Aiden, anything different from your timeline, your experience that you want to hit on?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, look, like, when I was a spring, my freshman year, I was not interview ready. I did not know, the baseline level of text that Ryan here probably did. I had some market sense and knowledge growing up I was lucky my dad is in finance, but I really didn't know what was going on. And so my thought process was like, and a senior as an incoming analyst told me this, at the beginning of the summer. He's like, Aiden, like in banking and recruiting, there's one thing that you can't control. There's one thing that you can't control, and that's like getting questions right, like technical questions right. And so like, again, I know I'm like a broken record here, but like the behavioral aspects of interviews and the networking aspects of the interviews, you have no idea if someone's going to like you on the phone. You cannot control that, right? Like it's just like you just can't. But like technical questions you can control. So my thought process over the summer was making sure I knew exactly what was going on, and I wanted to learn and know the most so that I could control everything that was in my control, basically, as far as technicals go. And like Ryan's right, like as far as the timeline goes, and that timeline process, your sophomore year, it's pretty busy. And so I think if you learn and emphasize the technicals before interviews and stuff start, you can focus on networking. So like as you said, like the networking timeline for me was late August to early mid-December. And so that sort of several multi-month timeline is when I was networking and whatnot with
Hmm.
analysts on the desks.
Yeah.
And then over break, as Ryan said, like that's your lock-in time. Like that's when you grind. Like that's when you grind. I remember doing like 2, 3 mock interviews every day. And then ultimately your first round interviews and even super days this year, I think I finished up late January, but my first round interviews were like the 3rd or 4th of January. So it's right around the corner.
Yeah. Yeah,
Uh,
for sure.
I'm sure the West and East Coast. I think the timelines are a little bit similar, but yeah, it creeps up on you. But that break is really important. What you do on that Christmas
Hmm.
break is really
Yeah,
important.
yeah. It definitely don't plan any vacation for that Christmas
Yeah,
break.
I agree. I agree.
But yes, the caveat is like, you get done with recruiting, the rest of your college experience is really chill. Like when your friends are all stressing about jobs, you're just gonna be, you could do whatever you want. And I just wanted to kind of emphasize something that I think Aiden touched on is, you really got to start thinking about things. Like some things are differentiators and some things are check boxes, right? And you want to make sure going in there, you have all the check boxes filled. But you really want to just deliver your personality as best as you can when you get to those interviews because that is your differentiator, right? Nobody else is you, but definitely make sure over the summer get all the check boxes filled and you're going to be in a great spot. So,
And to sort of piggyback on that real quick, Saw, like checking the boxes for technicals, it sounds easy. It's not. Like you gotta like make sure like because ultimately like if you just because you know the most technicals, you're not gonna get a job. But because like behaviorally, that's what's gonna come down to in these interviews, like if they like you or not. But checking that box of knowing your technicals is something that some people find difficult to do. So I will just add that.
Yeah, no, completely agree. Like, and even coming from like consulting recruiting as well, like same thing. Like, you could have the best smile on camera, but if you can't multiply like 7% of $300,000, like you're screwed. So I think like a big part of it is that really thinking through how are you, and I think Ryan, you put it the best way. Like, what are the check boxes versus what are like the nice to haves, and I think really making sure that where you stand out. Um, Ryan, I guess what would love for you to jump in here. What was the hardest part of the process, like that nobody really warned you about, or you might have had
yeah.
some headway, but caught you like a deer in headlights?
Yeah, no, for sure. I think yeah, so definitely I think it really depends on your personality. Like either the technicals or the networking is going to be the hardest for you, and it really depends on your personality. Like me myself, I'm a pretty outgoing guy, but I found the networking to be the hardest part for me. Because it's just at a level like you're setting up conversations and meetings at a level that just you're not really required to ever for like up until this point, like you're sending out like 30 emails, like 10 emails a day. You're scheduling like 5 meetings. Some days I'd have 5 coffee chats, which um if anybody doesn't know what a coffee chat is, that's like a pretty like professional but more like informal 30-minute chat where you're just discussing your career and etc. But yeah, that was the hardest part for me because it's just so much to manage, right? You're setting up so many calls a day. You don't exactly, it's not like they're people you know, right? It's not like you're setting up a hangout with your friend. These are random professionals that went to your school. And it gets exhausting. It definitely gets exhausting. And like, some people are easier to talk to than others. Not everybody's gonna hop on the phone with you and you guys are just gonna get along super well. So I think just like learning how to network with professionals, learning how to, you know, act in a professional setting, and then the organization on top of all of that is definitely that was definitely the hardest part of the recruiting process for me.
Yeah. So I guess Ryan and Aiden, or Ryan, why don't you go first and then Aiden jump in? w- I think there's two parts of networking that we always get questions on. I think the first is like I know it's transactional, you know it's transactional. How do you sort of not necessarily mitigate that, but still make sure that it's a forward conversation that helps you
Yeah,
move
yeah.
forward in your way? And then also just how did the conversations you were having with an analyst very different than when you were jumping on the phone with an MD? And whether you guys want to take one question each or just answer really quickly both parts,
Yeah,
feel free to go for
yeah,
it.
for sure. I can take this pretty quickly. I'd say like, yeah, at the end of the day, like it is transactional, but you have to remember like they did the exact same thing and they know what you're doing, right? So I think the most important thing is you just got to go in and try to have a pleasant conversation. Like, don't quiz the guy on the phone, like, or girl, like they're working like a 80 to 100-hour week. That's the last thing that they want is like a quiz. They just want like a cool conversation as a break, like they're taking time out of their work day. They're gonna have to make this up later. The least you could do is have a really pleasant conversation, be really interested in what they're talking about, or just have a good time. Like some people are gonna be like, I really want to talk about finance right now. Other people are gonna be like, I just kind of want to talk about my interests and like hear about your interests, So you have to kind of read the room a little bit. Um, and so I would definitely say that is a really important thing. Just be able to read the room, go where the conversation will go, let the conversation go where the person on the other end wants to go, right? At the end of the day, they're doing you a favor. I'd say the difference between analysts and MDs is definitely, um, you know, you just can't ask the same things you can't ask the same thing. You can't ask an analyst the same thing you're gonna ask an MD, right? Like they're just totally different jobs, totally different areas of expertise. An analyst is gonna kind of be more forgiving about mistakes and stuff like that because, they're young, they kind of understand their position. MD is like, he has a lot to say. He's a very powerful voice. He's not gonna go out of his way to really like just help you out so much if you just come off unpolished. So I definitely think the preparation when you're talking to an MD, you have to be polished. You have to be ask intelligent questions. You have to be very kind. You have to, be very professional. And yeah, definitely would say those are the differences.
Yeah, I still remember, like, I think one of the most impactful MD conversations, I think what for you was like 7 minutes on the phone, right? It's like, I think it's like
Yeah.
some of them, it's
Yeah.
like they know exactly what they want to hear. Like they're talking to
Yeah.
students consistently for years, and they're like, in 5 minutes, he already knew or she already knew like what they wanted to ask you, and it ended up being like one of
Yeah.
the most impactful conversations.
Exactly, exactly. And it was only 5 minutes because I think like I was able to present myself in a way that he was like, okay, I can trust this guy, like I'm willing to bet on him. It could have been an hour-long conversation where he's just like, he's trying to figure out if this is someone he wants to put his like, if he's willing to bet on, but it's you just gotta show your best self and that's something you're definitely gonna learn in the recruiting process.
Yeah. And Aiden, why don't you take the conversation a little deeper in terms like maybe like one or two key highlight conversations you had during the recruiting process that really stood out, and then anything that
Yeah.
maybe Ryan didn't hit on that you want to double tap on or go into.
Yeah, no. I think Ryan covered obviously really solid ground there. Like, there's, when you're talking to an analyst, you're talking to an MD. They're two completely different people. But I think an experience I can share was my first ever networking call. This was at the end of August. I had a networking call with an analyst, UT analyst, at a boutique bank. And for about 22 minutes, I got on the phone. I said, the first ever coffee chat. I said, introduced myself. And for 22 minutes, I asked that analyst about deals they're working on and the M&A activity and like what was going on in the market. And I hung up the phone. I was like, well, he cut me off after like 20 or so minutes. Usually these go for 30. And I was like, okay, you know what? I think that went great. Like he probably thinks I'm super smart. I asked really good questions. Uh, 5 days later, I got a text from an upperclassman whose younger brother was the upperclassman, and he basically told me, sat me down, is like, Aiden, like, you don't know what you're doing. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, I like asked smart, good questions. And he's like, no, like that, these guys are working 110 hours a week. They do not want to talk to a sophomore in college about the M&A activity in the markets. They do not want to talk about that. And I had no idea. I did not understand that concept of like, hey, what am I supposed to talk about on this phone with these people? So I think it sort of took a lot of time because, again, like I think there are two ends of the spectrum. One is what I did in that first call. The second is having just a normal conversation with them, asking them about life, weather, restaurants, the city, etc., and then not touching anything on that side. So I think for me, the first couple conversations I had, I slowly got better and better at it to where I found a really good balance between being extremely professional, asking high level questions, but at the same time, coming off as personal, coming off as like someone that they'd want to work with till 2 a.m. every morning, because that's ultimately what it is, right? If they don't want to work with you, you will not get referred and you will not get an interview if you come off too uptight in these interviews, in these networking calls. And so I think, that conversation was really important to me. Now, granted, I did not get an interview at that bank, but I think that conversation was the best thing that happened to me because I realized that there is a common ground between the two. And so when you are networking with analysts, which is where most of your networking calls will be, you have to find a balance between being personal, asking them about stuff on their LinkedIn. How was the study abroad that you did your junior year? How was this? But then also, oh, I saw your group did this deal, etc. So you want to make sure you do background information and research on the analyst before you just hop on the phone with them, because I did not do that the first couple calls I had, which was a mistake. And I paid the consequences and I paid the price for them for that. Now, I'd say networking with directors and managing directors specifically, I think the executive director role and above, their job is really big picture, right? So when you ask them questions and you converse with these guys, you want to ask them what their thoughts are in the future, what they think about what's going on, not just like what deal they did. Like, because at the end of the day, they're administrators, and so their assumptions are ultimately what matters. And so you kind of want to ask them a little about that and sort of direct those conversations a little bit there. At least that's what I found successful for me when talking to directors. And when you're networking and you're reaching out and you're emailing these people at these desks, you got to use every relationship you have. I don't care if it's your friend's mom's dad's cousin who was a banker. You get on the phone with them and talk to them because they may can introduce you to someone. So you have to make sure you shake the tree and have all the branches fall down, because ultimately leveraging relationships and getting people on the phone is what's going to matter and differentiate, because you can't just cold email, every single one of your coffee chats. You just can't.
100%. I think that's some really good insight and some really good ways to think about it. Look, why don't we jump a little forward? I know we're about the halfway mark. Let's talk about, now that the coffee chats are over, we're in the interview period. Can you guys just walk us through and maybe summarize just what the typical process looked like? Was it just straight to a final round? What is a super day? I think some people might be hearing the word super day for the first time as well. And then just maybe like your preparation process a little bit through it as well. And I think going through it. Ryan, I say you come off of unmute. Do you want to go first and take on the
Yeah,
question and then go from there?
for sure. I would say like honestly, there's not like a standard format for an interview. Like every firm is different. They like to do it a little differently. You know, every interview, you're gonna get a mix of behavioral questions, market questions, and technical questions. And each bank kind of decides how many rounds they have and what the weighting is for each round, right? So I could walk you through a couple of things. Like I know for a lot of bulge brackets, typically you'll just have a higher view. You might just have like a first round. A higher view is like a digital interview, and then you're going straight to the final round. For Brown specifically, you do a super day. I mean, you do a higher view, and you go straight to super day for those big Morgan Stanley, JP Morgan, and Goldman Sachs. There's no first in-person interview. Definitely probably different for schools. And I saw you on mute.
Yeah, let me just clarify something as well, but I don't want to cut you off. But we
No,
keep
for sure.
saying bulge bracket and boutique bracket. I want boutique banks. I want to make sure I clarify because I did not know what that was as a freshman.
Yeah,
Essentially, essentially, bulge bracket banks are Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, JP Morgan, UBS, Bank of America, and there's a couple more. They have lending abilities, and so they lend money. So they have an investment banking business and a commercial banking business. Whereas where Ryan's working, a boutique bank is a strict investment bank. They have no sort of balance sheet or no commercial banking lending capabilities. And so that's why, boutique banks have restructuring, groups and whatnot, and bulges don't. But I just wanted to clarify the difference. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's a really important distinction. Yeah, and again, like honestly, the interview process kind of de depends on whether or not you're interviewing for a bulge bracket or a boutique. Boutiques are known for being incredibly technical, so you're gonna have interviews with a much greater emphasis on those technical and markets questions than you would for a bulge bracket, where a lot of it's going to be behavioral, you know. And some banks, like I said, Goldman Sachs for my school, you just do a higher view, the digital interview, and then you go straight to the super day, which is a final round with three interviews. I was in a process for a bank called Title Partners, which is a small boutique tech bank, and I had to do nine interviews. I had a screener. I had a first round, which was all technical. I had a second round that was markets, only markets. Like it was just grilling me on a company that I liked. The third one, I had some offers at this point. So this third one, it was kind of just like a chat. He was asking me some behaviorals and telling me about why I should work at Title. And then I had a super day, which was five interviews. Took 3 hours. And it was a mix of behaviorals and market questions and like some scenario questions, which I think kind of fall into the same thing. So every bank is going to be different. We could definitely, like, if we all had all the time in the world, we could walk through every bank and what our interview process was. But I think the important thing to note is that typically with the boutique banks, you're going to have more interview rounds, and the weighting is going to be more towards market and technicals, whereas bulge bracket banks, again, those banks with the lending ability, it's going to be less interview rounds and it's going to be more behavioral and easier technicals.
My favorite was I had a notes app where I was like tracking everyone's interviews, and like Ryan would be like, I just had my interview. I'm like, okay, cool, we're moving on to the super day. And I was like, he's like, no, I still have one more interview. So again, like every bank is so different in the way they do it.
Yeah.
And I think like just be ready for that. But Aiden, do you want to hit on anything on your side with this?
Yeah, I mean, I will say also the school you go to matters. It's different at every single school. So, like, for example, like a lot of the bulge bracket banks at Ivy League schools are a lot different than like a Michigan or a UT. The processes are a little bit different. So, like, and excuse me, boutique banks are a lot different at the Ivy League schools versus some of the state public schools. I will say this: most banking interviews on the boutique side, the first rounds are all technical. They're just all technical because it's an associate or an analyst who's just reading off questions, and essentially what they're doing is they're going to ask you seven questions in 30 minutes. Whoever gets 7 out of 7 right, they go to the super day. That's just the reality of it because they have so many kids they're interviewing. So, like for example, Evercore at my school, 30 of us got first rounds. The person who asked us the interview questions was a first year analyst. He did all the first rounds, and he basically sent seven of us to the super day. And again, there's no personality, no behavioral aspect. He doesn't care about you. He's just making sure if you get, whoever can answer them to the best ability, you're moving on. So that's the boutique model. And then ultimately at the super day, you're going to have a balance between the technical market level questions and behavioral questions. Now, Ryan is absolutely right. At the bulge bracket banks, they emphasize a lot more in the market knowledge and behavioral aspect inside of it. Whereas boutiques, it's a lot of your raw technicals. And so they sort of want you to like flex your text a little bit, if that, I guess, makes sense. Um, and so I think, when approaching these processes, ultimately your Wells Fargo Super Day is going to look a lot different than your MOLA Super Day because a bulge bracket Super Day versus a boutique Super Day, you have to prep a lot of different things. And so I think ultimately as the time comes for these banks and when interviews, my best thought process was when I have an interview for a bank, I'm going to look up every single person at McCombs at UT who got the offer and is working there. And I'm going to mock interview with every single one of them for every single one of the banks. And not all of them would respond to me, but that's what I try to do. And they know what's best because ultimately they successfully moved on. But that's just what I did. And I'd recommend doing this.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, like we hit on before, like there's definitely a lot of personalities that thrive in investment banking, and for me, I was definitely more into the boutique aspect. Like all the offers I got were boutique investment banks. You know what I mean? And that's not a coincidence, right? Like that is just how my brain works, like how my personality is, and you know, it's just different for every bank, right? So all like you're guaranteed to have a couple interviews and you're gonna have to know stuff, but definitely depends heavily on the bank that you're interviewing for.
Awesome. Speaking of personality, let's jump into just the behavioral piece for like a few minutes. Look, I think, and obviously, like when, if and when you guys apply for the cohort, you guys will have a lot deeper conversations on it. I think Ryan and Ada would love to hear just were there one to two stories or one to two experiences that you loved leaning onto during your interview period on the behavioral side, or just one or two experiences you previously had. Ryan, I'll let you kick off.
Yeah, honestly, I would say like there's definitely a couple. And they're gonna be like very distinct depending on who you are, right? You want to choose a story that not everybody had has. So for me, like I'm from a really small town. I am a firefighter, like I'm a professionally certified firefighter. Which is like people don't really understand when I tell them that because it's just like, what do you mean you're a firefighter? But I did firefighting at home. And that was something I would talk about because I think there's a lot of parallels to investment banking, and so when people would ask me stories about teamwork, stuff like that, like I had a really great relevant example from being a firefighter. Other things I'd lean on were just like research projects or research I did. Like I worked on like several scientific research teams in high school. I did a bunch of research projects, and even while they're like super technical, and I could probably talk for 30 minutes about every like nuanced detail, like that wasn't the important part, right? The important part is like kind of like the simple stories, not really like what I'm doing in the projects but it's just like working in a team, working in a team and just t having an interesting example of how you're working on a team, right? They didn't take me for the job because I could explain my research properly. They probably took me because, they knew I could work in a team because I did in this setting, right? And everybody has unique experiences. I would just say like, you know, you just gotta like you just got to talk about your unique experiences really fluently.
Aiden, were you a firefighter as well?
I unfortunately was not. I was not as cool as Ryan in high school. I was not a firefighter. I wish I was. But I was a poker player. I love to play poker. And this is such a funny story, but there's two instances where this happened. This is why your resume is so important. But every resume, you obviously have your interest section one. And I always thought, look, like I have a 3.9 GPA from Macombs. I'm in a finance club. They have thousands of these kids. How am I going to differentiate myself? So I was thinking about it in my interest. I didn't want to, I had like Formula One, Michael Jordan, boring stuff that everyone has. But I had an upperclassman tell me, why don't you just put random stuff that you just like? So my second or on my last item on my resume was Sweet and Low, which is basically a sugar packet used in iced tea. And it's something that like my family and I love. We like bring Ziploc bags of Sweet and Low to restaurants because we just love this like sugar that we put in iced teas. And so literally, I kid you not, I don't think I've ever told this story, but in my Goldman Sachs Super Day, my second interviewer was a partner, not a director, a partner at the bank. And not everyone interviews with partners. I just got the luck of the draw, and we had a 15-minute conversation about Sweet and Low. She didn't ask me what school I went to. She didn't ask me what my name was. She did not give, she did not care at all. We had a like 10-minute conversation about Sweet and Low, Splenda, and one other sugar. And she told me that she, loved Splenda. And so we basically just talked about sugars and my Goldman Sachs Super Day. So that just goes to show you, behaviorally, you want to bring interesting things to talk about either on your resume or in your interviews. Because yes, okay, I'm interested in DCFs, I'm interested in stocks. Like, okay, no one cares. But for me, I truly believe I got that job because of this Sweet and Low conversation.
Yeah,
So that
I have another funny story like that. Like I love the UFC. Like I love watching UFC. It's one of my favorite things. And literally in my second ever core round, I mentioned that I liked UFC. And I talked to the guy for 25 minutes out of the 30-minute interview about his UFC fighters. And he would just tell me things that he liked about UFC. And like, some things I agreed with, some things I didn't. But on the interview, they were all my favorite things as well. So like we were just talking about UFC the whole time, and it was a great conversation. He would like we were doing technicals at the end, and it was for Evercore, and Evercore is known for having hard technicals where you have to do a lot of weird mental math. I was on this part of this question that was like you had to do the weird math, and I was like doing it in my head, And then he's just like, dude, the answer's this. And he's like, okay, let's go on to the next one. You know what I mean? Like he totally gave me the answer. Like after we finished talking about the UFC, like 10 minutes into our UFC conversation, he's like, by the way, are you in any other processes? Which is like, it's a good signal when they ask that. It's kind of
Yeah,
like,
that's
we kind of
yeah.
want you, so we just want to make sure we're on your right timeline. Ask me that 10 minutes in the question. I haven't even started talking about myself. We've just talked about UFC, and he's like, yeah, wait, do we have any conflicting timelines or anything? Like, we want to get this moving.
Uh,
So
yeah.
it'll be the most random things. You know what I mean?
Random
So
things. And by the way, you don't need to like put sweet and low on your resume. I am not recommending you do that. But
low
like
probability shot.
there's an upperclassman at UT who's going to Citadel. And in his final round interview, he had fermented tea bags on his intersection. So with the portfolio manager that interviewed him, they had a 30-minute conversation about fermented tea bags. So that just should put in perspective. You don't need to talk about stocks and bonds and funds, etc. Something that Ryan did bring up that I do want to touch up on is that reminded me of is interview processes and timelines. So a lot of what matters in investment banking is like your timeline processes for the processes because a lot of banks give exploding offers, which means that when I get an offer from a bank, they're going to give me 2 days to sign it. Otherwise, the offer explodes. Now, you may not, that may not be your top choice bank. Maybe Evercore and Menlo Park is your top choice bank. So you need to make sure, when you're in contact with these banks, you have to let every bank know and keep them updated on your processes. Because, for me, I had an offer at another boutique bank called Perella Weinberg Partners, and I let Goldman Sachs know because Goldman Sachs is my top choice, and they accelerated their interview timeline for me so I could sign, in advance. And Ryan is the king of accelerating process, so he can talk to you about that and leveraging offers for other offers.
Nah. We'll get into that story maybe once people join the cohort. But no, I think again, right? Like I think the big part of it is that as much as these two guys might seem like bots when it comes down to their technicals, it really is a lot of like who you are, your personality, really drawing you forward, and really going from there. And so I think a key lesson learned that if Splenda acquires Sweet and Low, we know that Goldman worked on the deal. So that's my big takeaway from today. Look, I think we're coming into it. Want to just pivot over in terms into like obviously we're an IPN panel. Ismaili community must have played some role, whether it was a small role, large role. Aiden would love for you just to sort of kind of overview in terms of just what role did maybe the Ismaili professionals play in your process and really the community aspect from there. And then Ryan, you could jump into it.
Yeah, I think it's for me what it came down to ultimately is when you're networking and you're sending cold emails out to UT analysts or people at your school or analysts on the desk, your response rate is extremely low. Now, when I put a Smiley student interested in banking in the email, I almost had a 80 to 90% response rate from people on the desk or street that were Smiley bankers. And so that ultimately played a phenomenal role and huge role in my banking process. For me, Nadim and Zahid are obviously, California, SF bankers. And so I think for my Moelis process, I had a lot of help from Nadim because I ultimately, who's a director at Moelis in investment banking, he basically allowed my Moelis Super Day to be accelerated, which I actually did not end up doing. And I think he's probably a little bit mad at me for that. So I'm sorry. I sent him an apology email about that. But he ultimately allowed me to advance a super day that I had, and he basically helped me plug into the Moles process. I don't know if I would have gotten a first round without him because he connected me with some analysts to talk to. And ultimately, I think when you talk to a smile of people on the desk and street, you don't need to be transact. They know that they want to help you. This is not a conversation where it's like, you don't want to come off as transactional because they want to help their own and just like you would help your own, right? And so I think that's super important to keep in mind is they have your best interest at heart when you're getting on these calls, even if they, don't love you. So, I mean, Ryan could probably speak a little bit more on that, but I think ultimately, getting into contact with a lot of these Ismaili bankers, they can not only introduce you to the right people, but they can give you really solid and blunt advice.
Yeah, I would say like I got mocked from some Ismail like mock interviewed by some Ismailis. I'd like to say like yeah, the conversation is just really fundamentally different, right? You're going in as a yes or I'm gonna help this kid, and you're not messing it up. Whereas with a random person, they're like, oh, indecisive, don't know if I'm going to help this kid or no, and you're trying to win them over to get them to help you and be invested in you. Like every single Smiley you hop on the phone with is already invested in your success. They want you to succeed, and that is like such a huge thing. On top of that, the response rate is like so much higher. Like I definitely think like I was in some processes because of Smiley professionals. I just think like like you might think that, we were talking before, like shake all the branches that you have, like take all the branches you have from the tree. Like the Ismaili community is so strong. We're getting better. We're getting a lot of professionals in investment banking. And this is like one of the best and strongest communities that you have to tap into if you're interested in investment banking. So definitely just the strength of the community really shines in this aspect. And I think like it's just talking to a Smiley is just night and day to talking to a regular professional.
Awesome, awesome. Look, I want to be mindful of time as we're sort of going through it. I think let's just talk about mentorship real quick, right? And I think we talk a lot about like these analysts that were helpful or upperclassmen that were helpful. Would love just I think what role maybe did mentors play in really making sure that A, you didn't go insane, but B, like you were on the right track. And I think Aiden, like you alluded to like a really good story of somebody pulling you aside and saying like get it together. And like I think there are like a few of those different instances, but any one or two mentors that just really stood out and really helped you go from there.
Yeah, I can definitely speak on mentorship. Without mentorship for me, I would have been toast, and that's just quite frankly the truth. I think having upperclassmen who had gone what I was going through, I did not know what I was doing, and Ryan can speak on this too. Regardless of what we say, we did not know what we were doing until. But when you have upperclassmen who were just in your shoes, literally 7, 8 months ago, they can tell you exactly what to do. And so my club at University of Texas, I really relied on my mentors, upperclassmen mentors there, because they ultimately guided me into telling me what I needed to do quite bluntly. Because I read a lot of stuff online, and it's like you'll be fine, do this, do that. But I had a mentor who's a junior, who's going to be a senior, who's a current junior at University of Texas. He basically told me, Aiden, you're not ready. You suck. And it was like the best thing I needed to hear, because like I was not ready and I did not know what I was doing. And so I think like having someone that's like told me quite bluntly, like, you need to do X, Y, and Z was the best thing that happened to me. In the moment it did kind of suck, but now looking back, honestly, like there's never a point where you're doing too much in investment banking or recruiting, and mentors will tell you that. So I think, that's what it came down for me. Analysts on the street are helpful as mentors, but mostly upperclassmen are the best mentors you can.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
think
Oh, my
sorry, sorry.
bad. No,
Go-
you go, you go, you go.
yeah.
I don't want to steal your thunder. You got it.
No, I think like going into that as well. And like Aiden, I don't know how many conversations with the Smileys you had that you'd consider like mentors through, but it's like I think the amount that everyone's willing to help, and I think Aiden said it before, like goes into it. And it's like you'll find these people in the randomest places. Like I remember we were at the summit. Aiden's like, I got my Goldman interview, and I think like 3 steps over from me was like Adil, and I'm like, Aiden, go meet Adil, who works in like Goldman private equity, right? So it's like I think a lot of it is that, and like Nyla, like always happy to jump on it. Like I think there's so many people who are just excited and checking in as well. But Ryan, what about you? What was sort of your experience with
Yeah.
people helping you out?
Yeah, definitely. I had so many mentors and so many different kinds of mentors, right? It's hard to like categorize all of them, but there's definitely a lot of people at my school that were just kind of like helping me out at every point, right? Like investment banking recruiting is like pretty Sisyphusian task, It's like you're just pushing the boulder up the hill the whole time. And if you have to constantly stop and think about what you're doing at every point for a couple hours, it's like it gets much, much harder, right? But when you have a mentor at school and they kind of just tell you what you have to do at every point because they've lived the process, it's like it makes everything so much smoother. And then also it's just way less frustrating, and that's what keeps the momentum going. And I think, honestly, Sahil was probably one of my biggest mentors as well. And he was kind of like a community mentor for me. He was telling me about some Smileys to reach out to. If it was a close friend of his, he would introduce me. And like that is just so important. Like he got me on the phone with a lot of people and also just like told me who I could reach out to. And, like Aiden said, like there's an 80-90% response rate when I reached out to them. So, had mentors everywhere. Mentorship is the frankly like it's like it's been so important to my family. It's the only reason why I have a great job now. I think like you really just need a couple people to invest in you and you could do so much more than you thought you were ever capable of. So yeah, mentorship is huge. And luckily for you guys, mentorship in the Smiley community is just something I think that's really core to our community. Um, every Smiley I hop on the phone with wants to mentor me. You know what I mean? It's almost like I have too many mentors or too many people willing to mentor me at one time. And, we're all just really, really lucky to be in this community. And I think like there's mentors everywhere, but definitely, definitely take the helping hand when you can.
Also,
Yeah.
yeah, shout out to Sahil as well. I forgot to mention. Shout out to Sahil, great mentor as well.
No, no,
Sal's the
I think
goat.
again,
It's the
I,
goat.
I think the cool part is that every person was like I think again, right? Like when you lean on somebody who's like 5, 7 years out, like they're able to connect the dots. Like I'm sure between the two of them combined, they knew maybe like two MDs and like four analysts before recruiting for banking, right? And I think a lot of it is that just really leveraging the people in front, and we're going to talk about how we're going to be doing that through the program. Look, very last question before we open it up to a few parts from it from there is look, if you're a freshman right now who's and this was sort of the beginning question a little bit as well. Like if you're a freshman who's considering banking, are there 2 to 3 check boxes to be like, I think that would be a good fit for this? And I know you guys haven't done it yourself yet, so you don't even know if you're a good fit for it yet. But I think what would love just to hear your take on that answer before we open it up for questions from the group.
Yeah, if I could go back in time, I would basically just learn every technical when I was 6 years old. No, I'm just kidding. But seriously, like I
We're
know,
doing this. We should do it in Mosaic this year. I think that's the solution.
yeah, no, but seriously, like, look, like I know I have been saying this again, like so much, and like you know, as a freshman, you can't network, you can't, there's interviews are so far away, networking is so far away. Like I said, the one thing you can't control is your technical ability. You can look up the guides online. There's so many resources, like Ryan said, with AI and chat and whatnot. And I'm sure he did a lot better job of utilizing that than me. But if you're a current freshman, please just read the Wall Street Journal. Learn what in banking really does. I didn't even know what bankers did. Like I didn't know what a sim was. I didn't know what a sell side was. I didn't know what an investment banker actually did. So when I was deciding, well, I want to do investment banking? Well, my dad told me, Aiden, do you even know what an investment banker does? And I was like, oh yeah, I don't know what an investment banker does. So I think learning what investment banking actually is, because it's a long, thorough process. It's really not, but it's somewhat of a complicated process. Learning what that is and deciding and thinking to yourself, hey, do I want to be an analyst in that job? Does the criteria of that job description fit what I want to do? And just think about it because it's a yes or a no. And so I think that's ultimately what I did, and I think everyone should do the same. And if that's what you want to do, I'm gonna highly recommend it. Grind the technicals. That's just all I have to say is technicals, technicals, technicals.
Awesome. Ryan, anything else on your end?
Yeah, I think Aiden hit a lot of great points there. I think like you kind of have to understand what you're going through, right? This is one of the unique times where it's not like you're taking such an intense job that you kind of have to understand exactly what you're signing up for, right? Like typically you're going to be working like over 80 hours a week for the first 2 years out of college, right? You're making this commitment as a sophomore, right? And you don't want to like sign up for this and then you realize by the time you're graduating, it's like you're working 50 hours a week is just it's going to burn me out, or working 60 hours a week is going to burn me out. You won't survive in investment banking, unfortunately. Like not to use like the super intense language like that. Like it's just going to be really hard. But from seeing a lot of my friends and like discussing with them, I think one the type of people that really thrive in investment banking are people that are very like long-term thinkers, right? It's people that, for me, like me personally, it's like, what I'm doing today doesn't really matter that much. I'm always like, as long as I'm working towards the long-term goal, right? And with investment banking is like a lot of people do investment banking because it really sets you up for the future. And you're taking on a lot of sacrifice and, frankly, a lot of like hardship in the present moment so that in the future you have a lot of opportunities. And I think that's something really important. You know what I mean? Like whenever I'm thinking about something, I think just because of my family background, I come from an immigrant background, like everything is all about sacrificing for the future opportunities. And that's really something that's really central to investment banking. So understanding that, being comfortable with that is really important. Like you are making a sacrifice to set yourself up, to set your future up, to set your family up. And you just have to really come to terms with that. And then another thing is, you just genuinely got to be interested in the work, right? You can't like working, you're going to be successful if you're working really hard in any field. It doesn't have to be investment banking, right? Like some people go into college and especially yeah, out of college, like Brown, in my experience, like everybody's kind of pushing you towards like consulting or investment banking, all these really high profile, like sexy fields, right? But at the end of the day, if you're a really hardworking person, you got a great personality, like you're going to be successful, right? Investment banking is a great way to set yourself up for success, but it's not the only way, right? And so to be able to work that hard um, after college and really thrive to get exactly what you want out of it, you kind of have to like the work a little bit, right? So that's where Aiden's advice is going to have to come in. Like you got to learn the technicals because if you are doing the technicals and you're like, oh, this is terrible. Like I'm so bored right now. I can't even do this. Like, probably it's not the right degree. It's probably not the right job for you if you're like going to ChatGPT or like Google or read the news and you're reading about investment bankers and it's just like, wow, this is so dry and boring. Like, probably not the right career for you, like it has to be interesting, but you also have to be in that mindset. You know what I mean? You have to be in the sacrifice now for like a lot of fortune in the future, right? And everybody thinks a different way. No way is the better way or the worst way. Like I'm not going to tell you that you need to shift your thinking if you think the other way. It's just I think those are the two biggest things that you kind of have to come to terms with if you're looking for a career in investment banking.
Completely agree. Look, what I want to do is I want to talk about the program for a few seconds and then actually show the IPN Online website just to show where it is and two, three cool things. In the meantime, everyone, think of your questions. Would love for everyone to think about it. So real quick, if you haven't logged into IPNonline.net, I don't know how you got the link to this webinar, but congrats, you somehow got here. Look, a few things. The first is when you click on these three dots, you'll see programs and then you will see the investment banking cohort. And this is the application. So essentially, what we're doing is you might hear at a lot of these schools, there's like Wall Street for McCombs and other different programs as well. We want to create a program very similar for the Smiley community. And I think if I had to bucket it, it comes into four. The first is we want to make sure that you are ready to interview. And this might be just Aiden yelling at you every single day to practice your technicals, but really just making sure that you have that part. The second pillar is we will be working intensely on making sure that you are connected to almost every Smiley in New York, Chicago, SF who is in the banking world and is happy to connect with students and making sure that you get in front of the right people so that way you could best land a shot at your interview. The third is sort of kind of more the skills prep, right? So it's how do I run a model? How do I do this? And we know each of you will be coming from a different skill set. And the fourth is having a mentor. So whether you're in like Ryan's small group or Aiden's small group or whatever, whatnot, you will have somebody who's committed to checking in on you a few times a week, making sure that you're going into it from there. Look, this is not just to recruit New York, whether if you want to recruit SF, whether you want to recruit Houston, whether you want to recruit Chicago, we want to make sure that this program is inclusive. And we do have a Smileys in all those cities as well doing banking. I have already submitted my application, so I'm a bad example because I was testing it, but it's really short. It's nothing too intense. It is application based. So what will end up happening is you will have until April 19th to fill out your application, which is roughly about 2 weeks. And then you'll be doing interviews. So you will interview with the group. Again, we will tell you everything that you need to know to prep for the interview. It's not nothing that's going to come from left field. But definitely be ready for it. We are accepting a small group because we really want to make sure that you're able to do it. So if you are serious about recruiting for banking, definitely this is going to be a phenomenal program for you to try out. The other thing I want to show real quick on the platform, because somebody messaged me about it, was just how do I find these people? Like how did all this come together? So what you're able to do in the search feature is actually search by company, right? So say for example, if you want to connect to somebody at Evercore, just put it in the search right over here. Any Smiley who works at Evercore's name will come up right over here who have synced their LinkedIn profile. So, for example, Zahid, he was a speaker at the summit. He's a senior MD as well. What you're able to do is you are able to then go into this person's profile. You can either send a message within the platform. This is not too great just yet. We're still building out the notification functionality, but you could click on their LinkedIn and you could easily just shoot them a message from there. So again, whether you want to, and we could just do this right now, whether you want to go work at Goldman, these are these Smileys that work in Goldman, whether you want to work at Bank of America, you'll have that as well. So again, a really great opportunity. There's over 18,000 Smileys on this platform, and we're constantly trying to keep growing it out. So again, a very great opportunity. for the program itself, Ryan and I think Ryan's leading this work stream. Like we're really going to make sure that who are these smileys, so that way you're just not shooting your shot in the dark, but who are ready and excited to help you through the process, and being able to go from there. Um, awesome. What I'll do is I will open it up for questions, whether you want to use the chat feature, whether you want to raise your hand. Would love to just hear some questions from the group. Not all at once. There has to be one question at least. All right. Rayhan, what is your question, or do you want Aiden to ask you a technical question?
Um, I have two questions. One a general question and one more specifically to UT.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so firstly, just for the program, like I'm still trying to figure out where my interests align and like whether I'm trying to do investment banking or like maybe, shoot my shot and try for private equity or something like that. Is this program targeted specifically for investment banking or is it like mainly like the New York area or
Yeah. Aiden, Ryan, do you want to
Yeah, like
share your
first of all, I
perspective?
think like when you say like try private equity, try investment banking, it's not really where you try one or the other because that's not how it works. Investment banking and private
Mhm.
equity are essentially the same. It's just one's on the sell side, one's on the buy side. So you don't just recruit for private equity or investment banking because ultimately the same skill sets required to recruit for either or it's the exact same thing. So like when people say,
Mhm.
"Oh, well, no, I'm not going to do banking, I'm going to do private equity." Well, no, that's like it's the same thing. That's like not really reality. Now, I think it's definitely not New York, just New York oriented. Ryan's not going to New York Bank. He's going to, tech and, an SF. And so I think that's really not limited as far as city goes.
Mhm.
Obviously, like I'm going to provide as many resources as I can to Houston banking and whatnot. So it's not New York limited. But again, like when people say like, yeah, I want to try private equity, not investment banking, like, and I hear it all the time. I just wanted to clarify, like, it's the exact same thing. Like, you shouldn't silo yourself into just banking or private equity. They're basically just two sides of the same coin, right? I
Yeah.
think Ryan
Yeah.
can add.
Mhm.
I was gonna just add on, it's like, and it's a really competitive job market as well, right? Beggars can't be choosers at the end of the day. You are applying to work at these firms. These firms aren't reaching out to get you to work for them, right? So, sometimes it's just about maximizing shots and the amount of, you have to just apply to as many companies as possible.
Apply
And
it everywhere. Apply
yeah, and,
everywhere.
and you're gonna have to. I wasn't particularly interested in working in private equity, but I still threw out some private equity applications at the end of the day because working in private equity is better than being unemployed. You know what I mean? Like you gotta throw all these applications out. Beggars can't be choosers. The prep has incredibly
Yeah, for
heavily
sure.
overlap, so it's like, just
No,
apply for
it's
both.
basically the same. Like a sell side process is and investment banking versus buy side and private equity. The ultimately the same skill sets used in interviewing, right? So I think like
Yeah.
Mhm.
again, he's absolutely right. Beggars can't be choosers. I applied to I think over 50 banks. And so you cannot limit yourself to,
Right. Right.
five or six different things or just PE or just banking. You got to apply to everything because, I know some of the smartest kids that just didn't recruit successfully and they didn't get jobs because a lot of it's luck too. So you want to make sure you're throwing a wide net.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Mm. But the second question, and y'all can tell me if this is like better as like just an email that I should shoot because it is a little bit specific. But like just as a freshman and I'm going into like the recruiting timeline relatively soon, like what kind of stuff should be doing,
Yeah.
UT or like just in
Yeah.
general?
Yeah. I'm happy to take this round. Like, I don't know if you went to the Wall Street for McCombs info session earlier this week. Like, obviously, like
Yeah.
that stuff's coming up. Ultimately, like, if you want to go to a New York bank, I'll just be honest with you, it's not possible without that program. So I think, when you are like, this is UT specific, guys, but if you do want to go to a New York, either private equity or investment banking in New York, if you do not get that program, it's just not going to happen. And I'll tell you this bluntly. So you want to make sure you're doing everything in your power to get into Wall Street for McCombs. And by doing
Hmm.
so, that is again like joining finance clubs. I don't know if you're in any finance clubs right now as a freshman, joining stuff in the fall. So like there are a lot of different finance clubs that I'm sure that you know of at UT, and ultimately getting involved with a lot of stuff on campus, whether it's like finance club, business fraternity, etc. Wall Street for McCombs cares a lot about being involved on a lot of stuff on campus. So you want to make sure in the fall, or right now, I guess it's a little bit too late, But in the fall before interviews are and applications are for Wall Street firm becomes applying to a bunch of stuff because you want to pad your resume. But
Yeah.
ultimately, if your goal is New York, you will not get there without Wall Street firm accounts. That's the advice.
Yeah, I appreciate it. That's really helpful. And I also wanted to thank you all for the session. This was really informative. I appreciate it.
For sure. Zamal, over to you. What is your question, or do you want Aiden to throw a technical question at you?
I think I'll pass on the technical question. I also have two questions. First, obviously, great webinar. I was gonna ask, I feel like everyone probably experiences the same that there's a huge amount of people that say they want to go into investment banking. Like out of all the business students at my school, probably half of them would say that. And only a very small percentage of them will actually end up going into investment banking. And so I want to ask, like, in your experience, what's like the single biggest like pitfall that students will face and that will hinder
Mm.
uh, their investment banking recruiting? And also whether the IPN program sort of helps in addressing that.
Yeah, that's honestly a great question. And I think it kind of goes back to something I touched on a little earlier, right? There's things that are checklist items and there's things that are differentiators. And your biggest differentiator is going to be your personality, right? It's really easy to pick a person that you want to work with. It's really hard to pick a resume, right? Like you're not going to pick a resume over like this really like nice guy that you have a really great conversation with to work at that night, assuming that he has also the checklist items checked out. So I'd say like, you know, at a bank, that's kind of why the networking is important, right? You want people in the bank to be like, oh, I talked to this kid. He was super chill. I would love to work with him. Like I want him at the bank, right? Um, that is what gets the job. So the pitfall is just going to be the opposite end of that. It's just like you're coming off as dry. You're coming off as another kid who just has like a good GPA and goes to this school. Like you're not really unique. You don't have a cool story. Like every conversation I left, I wanted them to leave with like a label, whether that'd be like, oh, this is the researcher kid. This is the firefighter kid. This is the electrical engineering kid. You know what I mean? Like I wanted them to come away with some nugget of information that they remembered me by and make it interesting and just have a pleasant conversation to be. So then when they're talking with their teammates, they can be like, yeah, I had a really great conversation with the electrical engineering kid. Like I think it'd be a really great guy to work with. So if you're not leaving a conversation, like if you're leaving a conversation and your label is, yeah, I like the econ student. He was nice. You know what I mean? Like which econ student? Like there's 70 of them, right? So make
Yeah.
yourself memorable and just have a really good time on the phone and get people to really want to advocate for you. So that's definitely the biggest pitfall.
Yeah, and he's absolutely right. I kind of do want to add one thing and share a little bit of a story. There was someone in my Wall Street from Economics class, which is a banking prep org at UT, and he is and was a very smart student, like really well rounded. Everyone like he was like a horse you'd bet on essentially. But in his mind, he thought that there were only 8 banks that he would want to go to. He thought that all the other 30, 40 banks below them were just beneath him. And he had 7 first rounds and didn't convert a single one. And he's out of a job. He's working, he's doing consulting now. And so that is a huge sort of reminder that like do not limit yourself to one group, one shop. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. You want to get as many eggs as possible and put them in every single basket because you just do not know what's going to happen. And so like that was like a perfect example. Like, and his story will be told at UT for the next like 10 years. Do not be like him because he had an ego and thought, I am above all these other banks, and he would, mouth about it, etc. It doesn't matter, but he
Hmm.
didn't. He only had 8 processes and he didn't get a job. So like,
Yeah,
I
and
think, yeah,
I'll tell you a story about I'll tell another story like that's the reason he got zero like super days, and that's not a coincidence, right? I had 9 first round interviews and I had 8 super days from them. You know what I mean? And I think that was because I really focused on delivering my story in a really like in a way that people really felt invested, right? Like there is a lot of luck in the process, but I don't think I got lucky and I got like my 8 super days because I was lucky. The one super day I didn't get was with Morgan Stanley, and guess what? I messed up my technical round. It was my very first
I
interview.
told you the
Messed up the
technicals, dude. You got to
I
get the
messed up the
technicals right.
technicals. I messed up the technicals. The guys really liked me. I messed up my technicals, didn't get that super day. Every other bank, I was like, well, I gotta lock in. And then I got I made sure my technicals were pitched like perfect after that. Did not screw up a single technical after that point. It was kind of just like, everybody has a bad interview. It's kind of a canon event. But after that point, it's like once I could answer all the questions well, like technical questions, I really focused on being able to deliver my personality and my story. And I didn't miss a single super day after that. Like I did not convert after that point. So definitely selling yourself. I'm sure the guy came in with the interview and they could tell that he had an ego about it, right? And that's something that's just going to instantly ruin your chances,
Let, let,
right?
let the
So
let the blood in the water be a lesson. Do not apply to 8 banks. Apply to there is nothing that is beneath you. Apply to everything.
yeah, yeah. And yeah, dude, you just got to deliver your personality really well, right? So
Yeah.
that's definitely
Yeah. Thank you. I'll save my other question for later since it seems like other people have some questions. Thank you.
Aiden, what's up? What's your question?
Yeah, I mean, thank you guys, first of all, Ryan, Sahil, Aiden, for giving us your time. So you kind of talked about casting a wide net and how it's like everybody has their bad interviews, everybody has their first coffee chats, like Aiden mentioned, that, don't always go as planned. So I wanted to ask, how did you kind of make adjustments after you had a bad interview, and what steps did you take to kind of reflect on it? And instead of letting it, take you down, like how did you improve off of that?
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, Ryan, you want to go ahead and start?
I was gonna take it first because I just gave my answer
Yeah.
about me having a bad interview. We could also touch on your question in the chat afterwards if you'd like. But basically, yeah, like at the end of the day, like when you go into your first interviews and stuff, you're just gonna be nervous, right? And when you're nervous and you're freaking out, like you're not as smart as you think you are, right? And I'd say like maybe you need like for me, I needed a bad interview to be like, wow, this is as bad as it gets. Like now I can't go any lower than here now. I just need to trust myself. At the end of the day, it's like you either know the information or you don't, right? And you just gotta have a lot of trust in yourself and a lot of faith in yourself and don't let the nerves take advantage of you in that case. So I think trusting yourself but also being very adequately prepared is super important for just like delivering the stuff that you actually prepared. In terms of um, you know, recognizing where you mess up, like unless you're talking to like in a smiley on the phone, like they're not going to be like, oh, you messed up this one thing, right? They're just not going to give you the interview. So what's really important is like mock interviewing, mock, right? Like
Yep.
a junior at your school is going to be able to ping exactly what you're doing wrong. Uh, because they're not that much different than a first year analyst, right? Like the first year analyst
They're
is
they're the
just
same.
recently
They're
on
the
the
same
job.
thing as a first year analyst. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, right? Like the first year analyst also knows nothing, the intern knows nothing. It's like, you know, they're going to be able to pick out exactly what you're doing wrong. And I can tell you, even on just being done with the process and having that experience interviewing, you could give me a resume or you could sit in front of me and give me your spiel, and I could be like, okay, well, I wouldn't say it this way. Like should be here. Like, like, oh, you're not saying this as well as you could be. Like, I would have a more vivid example for X, Y, and Z, right? It's just like after you've done the process, you know exactly what mistakes you want to avoid. So again, mock interview, rely on mentors. Don't just go in there thinking that you have everything handled because chances are, you're going to be oblivious. So,
Yeah, and I'll piggyback on this. Mock. Like ultimately, mock interviews will uncover weaknesses in either the technical or behavioral abilities. Because it's one thing to know a technical or have an answer prepped for why. Tell me about yourself or a behavioral, but actually sounding it out and saying it out loud is a lot different than knowing it in your head. And ultimately, in my opinion, I'd rather get part of a question wrong, but I'm like so fluid in the way I'm answering it that they don't even notice you get it wrong. And that sometimes happens. And that is grown through, Aiden, when you have a bad interview, just mocking and mocking and mocking. Because when you mock, that's the only way to get better, right? And so I think like, yeah, Ryan's right. Like there's, if you don't know the stuff, you're not getting a job. But like, and there's only so much you can learn up to the point. But once you mock and mock and mock and answer a lot of questions, your benchmark will be a lot higher as far as like, further interviews down the road. But that's what I'd say. He's right. Just mock.
Yeah, I appreciate that, guys. Thank you.
Well, why don't we jump over to Aiden's second question in the chat real quick? So I'll just read it. In terms of networking, once you've picked a few target banks, how intentional were you about getting in front of specific groups versus just meeting people across the firm? If you were to do it again, would you try to narrow into the groups earlier or stay broad at first? Aiden, you want to take this one first?
Yeah. Okay. So in boutique banks, it's obviously, as we mentioned earlier, it's, you know, only classics investment banking, like strictly mergers and acquisitions. There's like, product groups and like actual financing and lending, et cetera. It just does not exist because they're not commercial banks. So that's a great question, actually. This is a really good question. So in bulge bracket banks, there are, at Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, JP Morgan, there's two parts to the investment bank that are covered in IBD. There's classics investment banking, and then there's financing investment banking. They are two completely different types of investment banking. In my opinion, I don't think financing is actual investment banking because it's not mergers and acquisitions. It's just lending, right? And now, and I'm saying that because that's like the running joke online, but it is true. Like that's a really good question because when you network with people, Aiden, if you network with people on the financing side at Morgan Stanley and you don't really network as well on the classic side, well, if you tell me, Aiden, if you say, Ryan, I want to go on the classic side, but I got a financing first round. That's it. You're screwed. You're pigeonholed into financing at that bank, right? So as far as like actual coverage groups in the classic side, like, oil and gas, natural resources, tech, etc., that is like a secondary thing. You want to just get people on the phone. And once you get people on the phone and whatever big group, it does not matter. Once you get people on the phone, they can refer you to other people in groups that you're interested in. However, a lot of the group placement at some of these banks is a lot later. So most of the banks, most boutique banks, is you recruit as a generalist. And so that means is you get an offer as a generalist. And then after your internship as a junior summer, you get placed into a group. But I would say, again, financing investment banking, I'm by the way, that was sarcastic. Like it's a really phenomenal job. But if you do not want to do classics and you want to recruit financing, you want to make sure you're networking with people only in financing. So I wanted to make sure I got that clear.
It's okay. We heard your consulting jab at me as well. Ryan, anything different that you want to add in, or is that pretty much
Oh
covered?
yeah. So honestly, I mean, it really depends on the industry, right? Like if you're like interested in, consumer, which is like, for example, like Top Golf, like, like candy bars, stuff like that, you can't really network exactly into it, right? But there's several groups that actually do have their own distinct processes, right? And one of them is going to be like oil and gas banking in Texas. Another one's going to be tech and biotech on the West Coast, and then sometimes industrials in Chicago. And in that case, like for me, I did West Coast banking, and that was all technology. Like everything was technology, right? And so, it was very, very sorry. I have to remind myself the question, so I'm answering it as properly as I can. So I was super intentional about getting in front of technology people. But for New York, I didn't have like for New York, I wanted to be in the tech team, but you kind of just can't just talk to only tech people and expect to get a tech job or get an interview at the bank, right? It's just a numbers game, right? If only 10% of people are answering you, 5% of people are answering you, and there's 20 people on the tech team, right? Like, you might only get one response or two responses. Like that might not even, and you have to win them over. That might not even be enough to get an interview, right? So at first, it's a numbers game, right? Like you just have to talk to everybody from the bank. And this is a good thing because in New York, where there's all these different groups, the culture isn't just tech like it is in the West Coast. It's all these things combined, right? So you want to talk to everybody at the firm, make sure you're good enough to get a first round interview. And at some point, you're going to kind of know, right? Like, if you've talked to like seven people on the team and they're like, hey, like, you don't need to, I don't need to pass you on to anybody else, right? Like at some banks, like I'd talk to people and they'd want to pass me on to other people to kind of get me more acclimated with the firm. At some point, they're like, you don't really need to talk to anybody else. I wouldn't worry about it, right? Very subtly telling you that you're going to get a first round interview. At that point, talk to some people on the tech team. You know what I mean? Like it don't have that be your into the firm, but the kids that are able to talk to everybody on their firm on the team that they're really interested in, like that is what's going to, help secure your placement once you've gotten in there. So I would say you know, definitely not the strategy out the gate, but if you have a group in mind that you really want to work in, don't let that be the way you get your interview. Definitely start networking once you're at a place that's really comfortable.
100%. No, I think that's great advice. Any other questions from anyone else before we wrap up tonight?
Yeah, like happy to answer anything. Don't feel like, I know it is going long, but happy to help anybody out.
Awesome. I actually just got a question chatted to me directly. Hey Ryan and Aiden, I'm currently a senior in high school deciding where to go to university. Did banking placements play a role when you guys were deciding? That's all it is. Aiden, Ryan,
Yeah,
Aiden, I think that might be pretty relevant to how you were thinking
yeah,
about it.
yeah. I'll be quite honest with you guys. Like, a lot of what matters is what school you go to for investment banking and recruiting, because ultimately, like, when you go to Harvard versus another school, you're going to get more looks, and you do not need to go to Harvard to do investment banking, right? Like, I go to a public school. So I think, at the end of the day, when deciding what school you want to go to and thinking about investment banking, yeah, if you're dead set on, hey, I want to do investment banking, thinking about what schools are more target than the others is the best. That's like the biggest thing you should do, because if you want to do investment banking, that's like what you want to do. I would ultimately just choose a school that has the best investment banking track record. That's like the most target-ish of a school. And we're happy to, like, Ryan and I are happy to talk about, like, walking through with you on what schools to pick and whatnot. But they do heavily impact your chances. Like, for example, UT, we don't send kids to Lazard, which is an investment bank, because we have a bad reputation with Lazard. And like, if I'm sure if I went to Harvard or Wharton, I would have, you would have spots at every single bank. But I think, like, ultimately, if you go to, another school, like, I had gotten into University of Southern California and UT, and USC is really good for West Coast banking, and it actually is really good for East Coast banking as well. But at the time, I think I had been told by a mentor to choose UT because of this Wall Street for McCombs program. Now I will say USC has some of them have a very good banking program. Do not need to worry; you're going to be fine. But that is something that I did take into consideration. And I think in those situations, those are both top, two top, 30 schools or whatever the case is. So that's like nitty and picky. But, I think at the end of the day, that is definitely something you should keep in mind, regardless of, what anyone tells you. That is something you should keep in mind.
Yeah. No, for sure. And I'll kind of what I'll say is that, I'm interviewing fresh into sophomore year, right? Like they have no signal on me. Investment banks have like no signal on me. Like I haven't really accomplished that much as a sophomore in college, right? Like you're still young. Like I'm 20, you know? How are they gonna know that I'm like exactly who they want to take, right? And so that's why your school is kind of important, right? Your school kind of does some signaling for you, right? Like the more prestige your school is, like presumably the harder you had to work to get in there, right? And that's a good signal for a lot of investment banks. And then on top of that, um, there's a lot of perks to going to a like a target school, right? Like firms will come to Brown, they'll do interviews on campus. Like they'll get your foot in the door. Like literally, actually, I have a story about Lazard. I did not network with anybody at Lazard. I did not network with anybody in Lazard. I did not know Lazard was a place that I wanted to work. They came to campus. I got an on-campus interview. The guy like loved me. He introduced me to everybody on the team at Lazard that I needed to talk to. I ended up getting a super day there. I did not email a single person at Lazard on my own volition. Like he was like, okay, reach out to this person. He was just invested in me and wanted me to get a job there. I didn't do anything. And so like that was just like a free process that I was given just because I had the privilege of going to Brown, right? So it really depends on your school does signaling, but also it really can set up connections and um yeah, like it just having alum at these firms, right? They're gonna want to help you out. They're gonna want to advocate for you. So it's really important where your school is.
Yeah, and I'll add one more thing. You guys do not, not all of us are as smart as Ryan here, so you do not need to go to an Ivy League school. You can place into investment banking at a non-Ivy League or non-target. It is
For
definitely
sure.
possible and
For
doable.
sure.
But it does. He's absolutely right. Like it helps a lot, right? And that's
I
something that
would
you
say
should
the
keep in
amount of
mind.
effort I would have to put in directly towards investment banking recruiting is much less than someone at a like so and so non-target school, right? And that's just a privilege that I have by going to Brown. So to make your life easier, you should try to go to the best school possible, not only just for investment banking, but you're going to be around exceptional people. They're going to make you work harder. It's just overall like you just be ambitious and go to the best school you possibly can and the school that's right for you. But yes, like not definitely not impossible from another bank from another school. I'd say the biggest thing that they're missing at a lot of other schools is mentorship, and that's one thing that we're really trying to provide with this program. So
Yeah. And I will say, I think you guys hit it really well towards the end, where it's like we have Smileys who went to A&M and are now at Dallas Goldman, or for example, like Jeffries in Houston, and a few other schools like from Rice as well. We have somebody from Auburn who's like going to like Wells Fargo, Charlotte. Like there's a lot of really great people who go to a bunch of different offices all across the US and a lot of different banks. We'll do one last question. Zam, do you want to ask your last question and then we'll wrap up tonight?
Yeah, sure. It was more so for Ryan. I remember you said earlier on that like investment banking is obviously that's a hard job, and it's like a short-term sacrifice for, some kind of long-term gain. And so I wanted to ask you, what does, those first few years working in investment banking help you with further on in your career in terms of exit
yeah.
opportunities and whatever
For
else?
sure, for sure. Well, first, like, it's a great question. That is a really great question because at the end of the day, like, I didn't understand. Like, everybody's always like, "Yo, investment banking is the best thing you could possibly do," but it's like, why is that the best possible thing you could do? And I'd say like, you could definitely break it into a lot of categories. I'd say first, like, you are getting paid a lot of money out of college, right? Like, a lot of people say they don't do investment banking for the money, which is true. But at the end of the day, you're making like at least six figures out of college, which again, that's enough to be super excited about investment banking, right? Like they're compensating you a lot of money. Um, Another thing people like to talk about is the exit opportunities, right? And the reason why you get so many exit opportunities about investment banking is not only because you're working so much, you are literally putting in 80 to 100 hours a week, right? If you're thinking about another standard job, um, you're working 50 hours a week, you're basically getting 4 years of working experience by working 2 years, right? Um, Another thing is that these banks pump out some of the best talent, right? And these talented people go all over, right? They don't just go to the next firm. They go everywhere and they want to help out their alum. It's the same thing as going to a great school with a great alum chain. Another thing is that investment banking, frankly, is just a stamp. It basically just tells anybody who's looking at your resume, oh, this person can work. They're professional. They know how to work in a professional setting. They know how to deliver really important, um, precise, like clean, like presentations, like et cetera. Like whatever your work quality is just super high, right? And then the final thing is like, I was actually talking to someone who's working in my office. Full time next year. He did the internship. During his internship, he was on two live deals at every single time, right? And these are like almost $1 billion transactions, right? Like you are 21, 22, and you're being staffed on a transaction that has huge world implications and is also worth an incredible amount of money, right? Like think about how much responsibility that is, right? Like it's just like an insane amount of responsibility that you're having as a 22-year-old. And it's not like the people you're talking to at these companies are the people that are making the $1 billion decisions, right? Like as a 22-year-old, I've been told on some networking calls, like, yeah, I was like the only person on the phone with the CFO on this deal because they're at a small boutique bank. Like you're getting in contact with the most important people. You're seeing how the biggest companies in the world make their biggest decisions. Like you just get a really great sense for how companies function. You're coming out really polished. You're have a stamp on your resume for life that is saying that you're a really incredible hard worker. Like my boss freshman year, literally when he gets introduced places, they talk about how he worked at Goldman Sachs. You know what I mean? Like this guy worked at Goldman Sachs. It's kind of like, oh, he worked at Goldman Sachs. Like, he is definitely very polished, a very successful guy, knows how to work hard. It's just like it's the signaling and it opens up a lot of jobs.
Aiden, anything you want to throw in before we wrap up?
Yeah, before we wrap up, guys, like I think like a lot of great ground has been, covered. I think at the end of the day, like investment banking is not the only, like I want to sort of reiterate, like it's not the only like answer to, there are a lot of other great prestige jobs, but like I think someone mentioned earlier is like exit opportunities, and I kind of want to touch up on. Yeah, like if you want to exit to private equity, you cannot do it, doing another job. You just can't. Like if that's like a goal you have in mind, like, specifically exiting either to business school, you want to go to Wharton, Harvard, Stanford, you know, like the easiest way to do it is doing investment banking. Like that's just like if you look at the pool, I guess consulting is a really good sort of pool for MBA as well. I forgot about
I'm gonna make
consulting.
you sit through a consulting webinar just for this.
Yeah. But I will say, like, look, like investment banking is hard. It's hard. Recruiting is hard. The job is hard. It's difficult. It's really hard. There's nothing about it that's easy. But I will say, coasting for the next 2 years at college is phenomenal. Having the halo, like Ryan said, around my head is phenomenal, and it's worth it. So that's like all I'll say is it's hard, but like just get
You
through
can
it.
also just go anywhere. You don't have to go to
You
private
do
equity.
not
You
need to
literally
get,
can go
you can
anywhere.
do
The world is your oyster. So
No, I
yeah,
get that.
thank
No,
you everybody. Like
yeah, and even right now, like in my current role, like I'm recruiting for VC-backed startups, right? Like right now, I'm about to send out 100 emails to bankers who want to exit right now and be like a director for like strat and ops at like a med tech startup, right? So it's like, for example, like you will be able to exit into, especially right now, like some of the coolest startups in the world. You'll be able to go into big tech. You'll be able to go to a traditional CPG company. You could go a million different directions when you exit from banking and consulting. I'm going to throw that one in too. Awesome. Okay, cool. Look, apps are due April 19th. We are reviewing them on a rolling basis. Please apply. It's not a long application. It's really just 2 to 3 short answers for us to get to know you and a resume drop. And then we'll go from there. But thank you guys again for hanging out. Ryan and Aiden, I'll send their LinkedIns and like the follow-up email to everyone who attended today, and then you can just reach out to them on LinkedIn. I think I got like 6 LinkedIn requests during this conversation. So
yeah, me too.
really
I got like
me too,
8.
yeah.
I got like 8 of them. I've been
so glad
accepting
everyone's
them.
locked in. Sounds good, y'all. Thank you all again. Ryan, Aiden, thanks again. Have a good one, y'all.
Sweet. Thanks, guys.